There's no special equipment that you need for this session. This is obviously our Simplifying the Classics class, where we're going to be looking at The Screen by Edvard Munch. So it's up to you which medium you use to create this picture. I think for this one, I'm actually going to be using my pastels this time round. I've used acrylics and watercolors in the past, but I figured I'd go for something a little bit different. But it's entirely up to you. If you want to use paints or pencils or pens, you can use whatever feels right for you. And because of the style of this painting, there isn't really any kind of templates that you need to create certain shapes. There's no sort of large circles or anything in it. The only time that you might want to use something just to assist you is if you wanted to use a ruler or some form of straight edge to help guide you to do the fence in the middle. But to be honest, it's not essential. As long as you can create a semi-straight line, the idea of a straight line, you'll be absolutely fine. So, as we have done with our previous classes, I'm going to use my marker pen to show you where to place your very faint pencil guidelines, which you are then going to obviously go over and add to with your paints or your pens or your pastels. So let us begin. We're going to start at the top of the page, and we're going to go, if you're using an A3 piece of paper like I am, in fact, even if you're using an A4 piece of paper, the proportions are still going to be roughly the same. So probably just over a quarter of the way down the page, we're going to start by creating a dividing line almost, which differentiates the sky from the water. So it's kind of a horizon line. Now, none of these lines on the top half of the picture are even vaguely straight. So you absolutely don't need a ruler for any of these. So we're going to start, in fact, I'm going to start about just under an inch in, because on the horizon line, there's actually the head of one of our figures in the background. So I'm going to leave a little bit of space for a small head. And we're going to go across here. Kind of, obviously it's a little bit straight because it's a horizon, but it's where the water meets the sky. So I'm going to come across. And then just before we get to the end, again, probably about an inch in from the other side, we're going to come around and start just doing some swirls down. And what we're doing at this point is creating what almost looks like a small pond under the horizon line. So as you can imagine, it's an expanse of water, so there's lots of swirls. So we've got this kind of shape going on. Now notice I've stopped before the point where I started, and this is because this is where our second person, there's two people, there's two sort of long, thin characters are going to stand over this side. And so what we'll do actually is we'll draw those in now so that they're not going to get in the way when we don't have to worry about them as we're drawing our other lines in. So right next to this edge, the left-hand edge, about halfway above and below the horizon line that we've drawn, we're going to draw just a kind of oval shape, to be honest. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. And then I'm just going to carry on my horizon line just a little bit on the other side, just so that it continues beyond the head. And then we're going to draw this rather abstract shape. It kind of comes down almost like the neck of a bottle at the top. Then it kind of goes in like so. And the bottom is smaller. Now, you can add some more details into these if you want. But even in the original painting, there's very little detail. You can kind of make out a foot on this side. There is some sort of detailing or color change at the head, but really they are basically just kind of silhouettes against the background. Depending on which version of the painting that you're looking at, some of them kind of look bluey brown, some of them look more black. Now, when I've done it in the past, when I've painted it as a mural, I simply painted them as black figures because, again, I was looking for this kind of simplified version. And that's what we're doing today. We're just simplifying it and making it easy. And then next to this person, a slightly shorter figure. So we're going to do the head. And again, you kind of come out for their shoulders and down. And as I say, in the original, this one kind of has a foot showing. So obviously they're walking along. So that's our kind of two figures, or the idea of two figures. So above our kind of pond, and I call it a pond because, again, just referring back to the original image, this expanse here is pretty much all water, but there is this kind of highlighted area. So where all of this water is like deep blues and blacks, there's this really sort of lit area of water which has lighter blue and yellow and almost white in it. So this is the kind of shape that we've created. And there's actually a couple of small sailing boats there. Above our horizon line, all we're going to do now is put in some wavy lines. As I say, remember, these are faint pencil lines. It's just to give you some ideas as to where the colors change in the sky and where you can put in different tones and different shades. So we're going to start by putting in one wavy line, goes all the way from left to right. And I'm going to add in a few wavy lines above that. So if you're using paints, these are kind of the points where you could put in like darker shades of the color that you've used in the background, or where you might want to add highlights. So these are just kind of your guideline marks where you want to change up the sky a little bit. And then we're going to put in another wavy line all the way across. And we're just going to add some shorter lines in. Again, it's just where you can like add some detail. Again, if you're painting, these are good places to perhaps have some more defined brush strokes to add some texture and some depth. And then in this last section here above the horizon, just going to pop a couple more kind of lines, short lines. As I say, these are all on the original painting. These are all kind of brush strokes and slightly different shades of different colors. In the original, there's lots of reds and yellows and kind of very light browns almost. And there's also some little splashes of light blue. So it's really up to you which colors you really want to go for. The reds are quite kind of orangey reds. The yellows are quite sort of golden yellows. It's a very, very dramatic sky that we're going for. It's a very dramatic painting because the sky is very bright, very colorful. The water is very dark and very, well, dramatic really is the word to describe it. It's quite a dark scene almost. So what we're going to do is add in a few more details into this pond area. So if you imagine this line that we were drawing, it kind of disappears behind this person and then comes back out again. So it's kind of continuation of that swirl going around. And then we're just going to add in a couple more ripples in the water. Just kind of following the shape that we've already drawn around some of the edges. like so. Another swirl in the middle. And we've got this little gap here, and this is where we're going to add 2 small sailboats. Really simple. We're just going to do kind of like almost like a half moon, almost a crescent moon even. Just a little, the bottom part of the boat, and then a couple of sails on the top. There's not a huge amount of detail, and again, in my version I did for my mural, again, I just created these as silhouettes. They just kind of became black against this kind of brighter, lighter patch of water. But you could, you could add them in. You could maybe make the boat blue or brown. It would still balance out with the rest of the colors in the piece. So, that's up to you to use a bit of artistic licensing. And then this space over here, I've kind of zoomed in for this drawing. I've kind of zoomed in a little bit. In the original painting, I'll bring that back for a moment. Our main character is very kind of central in the piece, and there's what I can only imagine would be like a tall fence post or something coming down the side here. But what I've done, I've kind of cropped it a little bit so that we can make it a bit simpler. We don't have to worry about getting these straight lines down the side. So on the one that we're doing today, our ghostly figure is going to be more on the right-hand side. So we're going to draw him in just now, and then we'll be able to add the details into these 2 blank spaces. So really kind of simplifying him down, we're going to give him, his head is kind of like the shape of a light bulb almost. So you've got this kind of bulbous shape at the top, and then his jaw is kind of extending down into his neck. So we're going to do that. We're going to create this kind of bulb effect for his head. Like so, that sort of a shape. And obviously his mouth is famously wide open, gasping in shock and terror. So we give him a nice open mouth. He has these big, wide, round eyes, like so. And all you can really see is these dots in the middle. There are no kind of eyebrows or eyelashes or eye color or anything like that. It's literally just these kind of big wide eyes staring at you, and underneath there, kind of where his nose would be, all you can really see is the 2 nostrils. And again, just for guidance as to where to maybe add a little bit more tone, some highlights, some shadows, etc., you put in a few lines up there, one kind of down the side, kind of a wiggly line just following the shape of his face. And then underneath his head, just going to add a little bit of space for his neck. So his neck's obviously coming down directly underneath his head and is disappearing into the dark clothes that you can't really see what they are exactly. There is no definition to these clothes. It's not obvious if it's a top or a jumper, that you can't see legs or trousers. It really is just like a black robe. It's just this sort of black and dark blue mass of fabric that hangs off of him. Now, either side of his head are his hands holding his head in shock. So we're just going to do these super simple shapes coming down and around, like so. And the same on this side, coming down and around and back up. And then underneath where his wrists are, We're just going to do these kind of sausage shapes that are basically going to be his forearms down to his elbows. Like so. And then up on the left-hand side of him, we're going to give him a shoulder, because his body is kind of turned. It's almost following the path of the lines. His body's facing this way, but his face is facing directly at us. So you can't really see this shoulder, but this shoulder is sticking out. So we're going to give him a shoulder. And again, you could add a little bit of shadowing in there, or a bit of detail. Now, his whole frame in the picture, it's kind of just this wibbly line. He's not standing up straight. And as I say, most of his features aren't very defined. So we're just going to kind of follow this natural curve down. So this is kind of where his hips would be if you were drawing a person. And the other side, down that same way, we're kind of creating like a almost S shape. And we're just going to add in some lines here, because as I say, there's no detailing on his clothes. It's just slightly different shades, different textures, different brush strokes that you can add in where you see fit. So that is our main character. That is actually, if the stories are correct, that is Edvard Munch. And there are various reasons why he supposedly looks that shocked. There are different stories, but this is a self-portrait of him experiencing a very traumatic moment in his life, and the way that he saw the scene and his memories of it. So the vibrant sky, the dramatic kind of stormy waters, and how he felt. So this piece is very much about his feelings, his memories, and what was going on for him at that particular moment in time. So now that we have our main character, and now that we have our two people, we're going to start doing lines down here. So these are going to be diagonal lines, kind of going from our people in the background to our main character and beyond. And this is where, to bring back our reference picture, this is where these lines start. This is, there's three or so fence panels that come across, and there's some fence posts that go up and down. And then obviously this is kind of like the boardwalk or the pier that they're on. So we're going to pretty much start from the edge of the water that we drew here. So this point here, we're just going to follow on that line and bring it down and across to kind of the top of his shoulders. So where his shoulders meet his hands, that's roughly where you want your line to be aiming for. And then out the other side, kind of continue it along, it's roughly kind of where the top of that sleeve is. There or thereabouts. Now, it's up to you, again, how fancy you get. Most of the kind of 3D effect, if you like, will come in from the use of different colors. So the sky is obviously reflecting lighter tones onto the top of these spars and onto the other side of them. And this side is very much kind of in the shadows. So the top of these bars are kind of yellow. There is some sort of red in there for wood. And this side is very much kind of dark browns and blacks because they're in the shade. So you don't really have to worry too much about adding in too many extra lines or trying to make it look 3D. The different colors will automatically give it that sort of look. And I'm just going to, following along this line that we've just drawn, I'm going to continue that between our people that are up here too, because obviously the fence panels do carry on between them. And we're just going to add in a few details. What we'll do is we'll put a bottom line in. So about an inch, just over an inch down from that top line that we've drawn, we're going to draw on the bottom fence panel that comes along. And we're going to have it going roughly down to, I would say, kind of the bottom of where his shoulder meets his arm down here. So just to give you that sort of rough proportion, it's obviously narrower up here, it's getting larger down here, and that's obviously to do with perspective. The things that are in the foreground of our picture are going to be bigger than the things that are in the background. And at this point, all you need to do is just add in a few extra lines just to create that feel of there being fence panels coming across. Maybe add one more. Remember to carry your lines on the other side of our main character. So basically what I've done is we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 lines because there were 3 panels going across. Now it's up to you. You could just leave it as these fence panels coming across, or you could add in a couple of downward lines. Now, if you want to add in the fence posts that come down, I wouldn't add too many, but you would put in one roughly about there-ish, so kind of 1.5 inches or so after our background figures, and then another one probably 1.5 inches or so behind our main character. And if you wanted to, you could add in another one down here, but there's not really space because we're doing a zoomed in shot. There's not that much space. Now, obviously, these are your guidelines. On here, it looks weird because obviously I'm using a marker pen and it shows up. These lines that are on the crossing bars aren't really going to show because they're all going to be colored. So you won't see yours, which is fine. But what you can do, again, if you're wanting to just give it a little bit more depth, is on the parts that are in between, you can add in another small line just to kind of give it a more 3D effect, as if you were kind of drawing a cube. So you can just add in a much thinner line, much closer, just on the right hand side, and it'll just help it to look. So again, this would be kind of dark, but then again, so is all of this. So you just want a slight tone difference between your brown or your black that you're using, just to kind of show a little bit of definition there. But as I say, this is really, we're trying to keep this super simple and not add in huge amounts of detail. So that's where I would leave that. I wouldn't go any further with that. And then all we're going to do is this area in the background here, on the right hand side, we've got a lot of these kind of swirls. So we've got this sort of swooping down line on our original picture. So we're going to kind of recreate that. Kind of comes down and around. Again, you're using pencil. This is just to kind of show you. Also, it shows you the way to follow that shape. So if you're using paints, that's kind of the shape that you want to be following. That's kind of the line that you want to follow when you're painting, so that's kind of where your brush strokes will show. Because remember, in the original painting, there's lots of very, very rough brush marks. The whole thing, you can see brush marks and scratch marks where he's used different mediums and different tools to lighten and darken certain areas. So this isn't really sort of a one color, nicely finished piece. This is very rough and raw, and you can see all of the lines, and none of the colors are the natural colors that you would expect these things to be. So you can really kind of play with this and make it sort of super dramatic. And so in this space, we're just going to add in a few more kind of swirls and lines just to give a slightly more rippled effect. Remember, this is water. So there aren't really any straight lines, water's moving and swirling. So just to fill in the space. So that's our sky and our water. You can take it up to the top of your page if you want. I've just kind of left a bit of a gap, but you can absolutely just fill it to the top of your page. And then down in this side, there really is nothing of any great detail in the painting. So all we're going to do is we're going to add in some more horizontal, or rather diagonal lines that are going to be coming out. But rather than them all following the line of the fence, we want them to be kind of coming from these people to this big space. We want to fill the space. So whilst the ones over this side will almost follow that line, the ones on this side are going to be coming out. So we're kind of, again, they're closer together by the people in the background. They're further apart as they come towards our main character. We want to try and create this kind of perspective feel. And all we're doing is creating, they're basically wooden planks that form the pier. So we're just kind of giving it some texture. We're putting some of the lines just to give it a little bit of detail. And again, this will all be filled with sort of various shades of browns. There's even, again, there's even bits of blue put in there by the artist originally, and shades of red. So this is our very basic outline of our painting. As you can see, there's no area on the original painting that is just one color really. Everything, the sky, as I say, has shades of orangey red and orange and yellow and kind of yellowy creamy brown colors, and these flashes of bluey green in the sky, and flashes of this light blue even on this side, where you can't really tell if that's water or if it's an island even, because there's these sort of very light brown, almost sandy color patches in here. There's lots of blue scratched into the deep waters over here. And then on the boardwalk coming down here, you've got obviously the tones you would expect, the browns and the reds of the wood, but there's also these scratched blue parts in as well, just adding in highlights, I guess, and just blending all of the colors and bringing it together to make this really dramatic piece. Hopefully you've got all of your lines down and you're ready to start adding colors and things. I'm going to move this one to one side, and I'm going to switch it out with another sketch that I've done so that I can really sort of show you the detail and the building of the picture without it actually having black marker pen all over it, which kind of spoils the finished piece. So I'm going to use pastels. So what I'm going to do, if you bear with me for a few seconds, is I'm going to mask my piece of paper down. This is a good trick if you are painting with watercolors, unless your paper is obviously still attached to a pad or you've attached it to, say, a clipboard. We really just don't want the paper to be moving around too much. Also, when you're using watercolors, the other thing to bear in mind is the paper gets very wet, and in the drying process, the paper will tend to wrinkle because the different parts of the painting will dry at different times, and that's what causes the wrinkling of the paper. But another thing is, obviously I've already said that I'm going to be using my pastels today. The other benefit of taping off a rough border on it, I'll try and get the lines straight, is because when you're using pastels, you do really need your paper to be still. You're moving around quite a lot when you're kind of smudging the pastels, And so if you're constantly rubbing at your piece of paper, you can imagine it kind of shifting all over the place, and yeah, it's not, it's not very helpful. So we want to keep it still, but also it creates a really nice finishing effect when you take your tape off of the picture. You have this nice white or cream border. It's a nice, clean, fresh look to the piece. So especially if you are planning on like framing it, it's really nice to have that border on it, which is nice and clean, and it gives you a nice sort of finished edge where you're putting your pastels and things. But you could do the same thing with acrylic paints as well. You can absolutely mask off the background, or rather mask off the edges, to give you a nice finished piece. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to use my pastels. So I have them here. I'm just having a quick look. I'm going to decide which colors I want to start with. I think what I'm going to do is, so that I don't make too much mess and I'm not leaning over my work a lot, I'm going to start with the sky. So I'm looking for suitable kind of ready oranges. So I think probably that one. Probably some lighter orange, kind of a goldy yellow. And as I say, there are flashes of blue. So I'll maybe that one, or maybe that one. Lots of colours to choose from. So, and obviously I do have my I have my white there as well if I want to add in any whites. So just start gathering together the different colours that you want to use for your piece, and we'll start laying down some colour. So at the top here, I'm going to start with my orangey red. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen me do pasteling before. It's slightly different and slightly messier than painting. When you paint, you tend to put down very precise brush strokes, and you want to stay very much between the lines. Pastels are much more blendable, so you can, and they're generally more messy. So they're a little bit like using wax crayons to start with, in that you can't get a very clear line. But what I'm going to start doing is laying down this color and sort of blocking out areas that I want to be this color. Now, pastels, as I say, you can blend them, you can layer them to a certain extent. So I'm just going to go in and add this lovely, it's like a vermilion. It's a, yes, it is vermilion. That is me checking the name of the color, but it is. It's a very orangey red color, which is one that I don't use too often. I tend to find myself using crimson quite a lot. I like the sort of deeper, darker red. Now, if you're not used to using pastels, you have to try and lay down a reasonable amount of color. You don't want too many white spots, although don't obsess over it too much, because when you blend them and smudge them, you will be able to kind of cover little specks here and there. So that's not an issue. So whatever you're using, your paints or pens or pencils, start off with a nice kind of reddy orangey color, very dramatic sky colors. And then underneath that, I think, let me see, there's lots of kind of reddy, reddy orangey colours, but there is this kind of strange, almost beigey type colour. Now, I didn't really use that when I created my mural. I created it with orange, red and yellow with a few blue streaks, but let's try it, because we like being experimental. So we're going to add in some of this. What is this colour? Pale brown, apparently. It's almost like a skin tone colour, actually. It's very sort of light beige. So one thing I really like about art is that you can try so many different things, and there really isn't any sort of wrong or right. You can play with things, and if they don't turn out the way that you wanted them to, they don't turn out in the way that you maybe saw in your head, that's okay, because you still learn from it. You still, even if it is learning what not to do the next time, or learning that you don't like something a certain way, that's okay, because until you try something, you're never going to know if you like it or not. So I'm going to, actually, yeah, I'm not going to put the, there are blue flashes that go in the top, but because I'm using my pastels, I'm going to wait until I've blended those colors before I add the blue. I'll add the blue on top, so as another layer over it. I'm going to go back in with my reddy orange color again. I think I quite enjoy pastels because it kind of reminds me of my childhood, of using crayons and of not having to completely stick within the lines, and of just being able to relax and not make a mess, or relax and make a mess of the picture and not have to worry about it, because it's kind of what you're meant to do with these. And then I think I'm gonna grab some of this sort of yellowy, orangey yellow, and put some of that. Oh, that's a nice color, like that. So just kind of following those lines along that the guidelines that we drew, kind of coloring or painting in those directions. Get some of my other yellow on the go as well. As you can see, my pencil marks are showing through. Or you might not be able to see on the camera, but my pencil marks are still showing through. When you use pastels, you really do kind of need to sketch very, very faintly, because otherwise the graphite does tend to get mixed a little bit with your pastels. But it's no biggie. It's okay. Okay, going in with a bit of actual orange. So basically we're going down to this this line that we created as like our horizon line, if you like. So our sky kind of comes down, but it does get darker. So what you could do in this very bottom section, you could actually start sort of laying down a darker tone of whatever color you've been using. So if it was a red, you might want to sort of take it into a very deep red, or add some blue or black, or you can play with it and see what feels right for you, depending on the color sequences that you've used. But probably going to want to make it a bit darker than the bright sky that we've created. Now, don't worry if you've already painted down to the horizon line, because obviously you can add another layer. You can always add paint. It's much harder to take it off, but you can add. So in this instance, I have got this. Is that a crimson? It's probably a crimson red. No, just red. So behind our people's heads, I'm going to go in with this darker red. So before I add any blue and black and whatnot to our water, I'm going to blend the top part of this. Now, you can use your fingers if you're using pastels. However, they'll get messy quite quickly. So what I tend to do is get a bit of kitchen roll and just fold it up until you've got like a nice little wodge. You can fold it into a square and use the edge, or you can fold it into a triangle and use one of the corners, just whatever feels kind of right to you, or you can just kind of fold it like that and you've got this nice round edge. Now, if you're mixing pastels, I would advise that you smudge the lighter colors first. So if you have yellow or white or creamy colors, go with those first and just start blending them together. You're literally just rubbing backwards and forwards where you've laid that color down, and you'll see it blending. You'll see all of the little white specks getting filled in, and you'll see the other colors starting to blend as you move your kitchen roll around. So I'm going to come down from the yellow into the orange. You can blend those lines together. You can rub it. You might find that the more you do it, that you'll get some sort of shards of, not shards, but some bits of kitchen roll that start flaking off. That's just one of the hazards of the job. We just need to blow those. Try not to rub them off of your paper, because you will smear color up your page. So yeah, pastels can be a bit messy. So if you are using them, have a big bit of space and maybe have some newspaper down. Because what you ideally need to do is blow the dust off, blow the bits off, rather than wiping them, because you're just going to wipe more color across your page. And then we're going to come down to this dark red at the bottom. I don't want to take it too far down, because I do still want to add in a little bit of deep blue at the bottom on our horizon line. Now, if you find that once you've smudged your pastels together, there are still tiny little gaps of white that haven't filled in, you can quite literally just go back in with your pastel and fill it in. It's simple, just like that. You just go back in, put a little dot of pastel over where the white bit is, and then just smudge it in. See, super simple. So I'm going to go up. You'll need to change your bit of kitchen roll quite frequently, also depending on how hard you rub. But I'm going to go in and do this kind of creamy line that we've got going on up here. You don't really want to use the same bit of kitchen roll. See, every time I change color, I fold it in a different direction so that I'm going back in with a clean bit of kitchen roll, unless you're working from light to dark. So if you had, light blue, mid blue, dark blue, you can start at the top and just keep working your way down. And you don't, it's not imperative that you change the bit of kitchen roll that you're using, because the light color is not going to affect the dark color. In fact, it will just help to give you a nicer gradient. But when you're using different colors, like we are just now, and much lighter colors, you don't really want the darker colors making a mess of them. I hope this is making sense to you guys. If you do have any questions about pastels, then you can put them in the group. It's not a problem. And I will answer them. So now we're going to fill in between the peach and the yellow. We've got this other line of orangey red, so I'm going to go and really blend that in now. And it doesn't matter if you do go slightly into one of the other colors. In fact, you're kind of wanting to blend them and not have these really harsh lines between them. So then I'm just going to go up to our top part of orangey red. Again, if you're using pastels and you have got it masked like I have, you want to try and make sure that you get all the way to the edge of that masking tape, so you've got that nice clean finish to your picture. Otherwise, it'll all just be kind of bitty and rough around the edges. It's up to you which way you go. I tend to work backwards or forwards, but there are times like just now where I'll kind of go around in circles. Normally when my thumb's getting sore, because you do have to press quite hard to blend them in. So you just have to find out what technique works for you that is the most comfortable in that moment. There we go. I mean, if you're careful, you can kind of brush the bits off, as long as you're not pressing hard and, they're not super dark colors. Next, I'm going to move down to really start to darken things up along this horizon line, because we're coming into our deep, dark waters here. So I'm going to go for a fairly dark blue, kind of almost maybe like an ultramarine. I might even add a little touch of black afterwards, but we'll see. We're going to go in with some blue first, and this is literally just kind of where our horizon line is. So I'm just going along, just kind of following that horizon line along, and what I'm going to do to begin with is kind of follow that pond line that we created. Kind of come around. And obviously this bit over here where we've got our people, it's a little bit fiddly if you're using pastels, because there's not much space. Obviously, if you're using paints or pens, you've got a much better chance of doing it nice and neatly because you've got a finer brush. But that said, with pastels, if you are using pastels, what I would recommend for this piece specifically is that you use your pastels for the bulk of the picture, but with things like the two figures in the background, you could actually use a graphite pencil afterwards, which will give you a much cleaner outline, a more defined finish, which you can actually do with watercolors as well. But if you've got a fine watercolor brush, then you're just as well to paint them in. So I'm just very carefully going around the tops of our figures and then finding a point kind of behind the boats. So I'm going to take this blue color to somewhere around here, because obviously this is our pond that's going to be more yellow and light blue. I'm going to darken this blue down. I'm going to add some more tones into it to make it darker. Because it's actually still quite a bright blue. Kind of wanted it more to be like a navy, so I think I'll go in with another blue as well and kind of mix them together. Let's see, what's that one? Prussian blue. Now the blue in our picture, remember where we started drawing our lines down to the right of our main character? We're basically going to be kind of the dark blues before it changes into random blue, green and brown kind of colors. We're going to just sort of mark that so that we know where to take our blues to. And basically around the top of his head, which I'm going to avoid just now with my pastels. I'm kind of going just outside of that line because obviously his face is going to be a much kind of lighter color. So I don't want to get blue on there just yet. But I'm just kind of marking out the territory that I'm going to be filling with our various shades of blue and black. So I'm just going to kind of build up, just adding in different shades, following the lines that we put in, kind of give it some depth. Oh, that's nice blue as well, some of that. Obviously with pastels, the pastels wear down and you have to tear the paper down as well, a bit like wax crayons really. So I'm going to add in these darker, well, mixed shades of blue, and I think before I blend it, before I smudge it all together, I will add in some touches of black here and there, just to give it a little bit more darkness. You can really have fun with this, just putting the different colors, the different shades, wherever you want, really. Just let your intuition guide you. Okay. So I'm going to grab my black and just very gently going to add some touches of black in here and there. Now, obviously, black is going to smudge. It's going to make things darker. So if you are adding black to your piece, then do so with caution. Be careful. add a smaller amount than you probably think you need, because you can always add more, but black is almost impossible to lift again if you happen to put too much on. So just use it with caution, but it's very good for darkening colors and getting that sort of dramatic effect that we're looking for. Now, again, before I smudge this piece, I'm going to go in and add our colors to our pond. Now, our pond is, in the original painting, is kind of predominantly made up of this kind of this sort of skin tone color almost, and yellow with some hints of light blue. So we're gonna kind of recreate that. I'm gonna put some of this sort of creamy color in the middle. And then I'm gonna get my gold and yellow again and do most of it with the gold and yellow. It's a really pretty color. Now, again, as I said earlier, my the boats on mine, I tend to just do as silhouettes. It's up to you if you want to paint them a different color, but for the time being, I'm just kind of covering them with a yellow because the guidelines show through anyway, and I'll go back in with a graphite pencil afterwards and add those in as final details. Okay, so that's mainly yellow. And then I'm going to go in with my lighter blue and just add more as highlights. They're going to be kind of greeny, but that's okay because they kind of are in the original picture as well. But obviously they're blending with the yellow, and they're kind of where our guidelines are. So I'm going to add them, add the blue around to the guidelines. Now bear in mind, these are all going to be blended out, so the defined lines are going to be lost somewhat, and that's fine. Just blocking in the color. Excuse Bear in the background, sneezing and making funny noises, as he does. Okay, so now that we've got this bit blocked out, I'm going to start blending it together. Just filling in a few more of the white gaps with my lighter blue. Going to create a few more highlights. Now, obviously, I'm going to have to be a little bit more careful when I'm blending this area because there's, you know, the yellow part is obviously a lot smaller than our big sky. But we can, as I say, you can use the point of folded kitchen roll Wow, Bear, really? Okay, so I'm going to attempt to work on this kind of pond area and start blending it without dragging too much of the blue into it, initially anyway. Although the blue that I've laid down on top of it is obviously going to blend. But the fact that these colors are kind of merging and almost kind of making a mess actually makes it more authentic. As I said, the original painting was very messy, very rough, and lots of areas had very mixed colors that weren't very clear. So don't get too worried if when you're laying down colors and blending them, they actually kind of mix together a bit too much, or one goes over the other. It really just adds to the depth and the general feel of the picture. Okay, so it's kind of my pond area blended out. So I'm going to then expand out and start blending the water. So kind of working along the pond line at the top. Following that line around. Applying a reasonable amount of pressure. And don't worry about that bit going onto the people, because that's going to get covered up by the graphite anyway. I just keep folding my piece of kitchen roll backwards and forwards to find a clean bit. I'm just going to smudge in that little bit of blue that we've got under the horizon and start blending the blue between the people, around their heads, as best I can, trying to keep it neat. And then I'm going to go across the horizon line here. Now you'll find that as you do this, you'll find kind of your own speed to work at, your own techniques for doing it that work for you. Obviously, I can only really teach you the way that I do things. I can only show you what works for me, but you might find that actually doing it completely differently is better for you, and that's cool. Always work with what feels right for you, not what somebody else tells you is the right way to do it. Now I'm going to blend some of this blue up ever so slightly into the horizon lines, because I don't want there to be a really clear line. I want it to just kind of merge between the sky and the water. Some little white bits, fill those in. So, I like the fact that pastels give it a very sort of soft, like diffuse effect, almost like a glowing almost. It's a really sort of gentle effect that it creates. So you can see but there's not a very clear line there now. It all just kind of blends into each other. That's sort of what we were going for, or what I was going for. And I'm going to come down this side I'm going to start blending out from this side of the pond. Now remember, I said down here around his head, I'm not going right to the outline of his head just yet, because I want to lay down the colour on him before I blend the two together. So I'm working quite closely to the line, but not quite. Just trying to blend in all of the water behind him. Along here where our fence panels are going to go. And again, once you've done that, if you do have any white specks or white scratches or anything like that that you want to fill in, you can absolutely do that. If you're using watercolors, obviously as it dries, you can see for yourself where you need to go back in and touch things up, or add another layer if you want to make it a stronger, more opaque color. There's just a couple of bits I'll just touch up. This is another one of those paintings that, you know, you could really spend as long as you want coming back to it. It's one of those sort of pieces that if I was creating in my own time for my own entertainment, I would probably do it and then come back to it a couple of times and add some more detail, add some more depth, you know, touch things up here and there, and just keep adding to it. Sometimes too much. You have to know when to stop as well, because otherwise you can end up almost spoiling a piece by overworking it too much. But you play with it until you're happy with it. Okay, so we've now got our sky and off the first part of our water. Now it's up to you. You might find that you just want to start working on this side. Basically, I'm gonna create the color for his face and his hands, and also add some of that skin tone into that part. So I'm gonna kind of work on this whole area at the same time. But because I want to obviously be able to define that line at the back of his head, I need to get some more of the color onto him first before I blend it in too much. So I'm just going to lay down this kind of light browny color. his skin tone is, it's almost kind of skin tone, but there's also a lot of yellow in there as well. And also, not entirely sure how you would describe it. There's almost this kind of like dirty feel to it as well. There's sort of smudges of other colors in there. I don't know whether it was kind of done intentionally or if that was just part of what happened in the process of painting it, but it definitely kind of adds to the sort of overall spooky feeling of the piece, because the whole picture is quite sort of dark and mysterious. And even his eyes, they're not white like you would, as if you were drawing a cartoon or even a portrait. They're not white. They're kind of this, again, this light brown, light creamy color. Pretty much the same color as the rest of his face. So whilst I have this very light brown skin tone color, I'm gonna add some of that over here to get some down. This area is definitely more of just a mess of colors. So I'm gonna put some of the blue down as well. Again, just remembering to follow that kind of sweeping motion with your coloring or your painting. So I'm just putting in a couple of different shades of blue, a darker blue and a lighter blue. Let's say some of that sort of lighty brown color as well. And this is really where pastels are good, because this is all going to blend. If you're using paints, then I would probably just, you could lay down the sort of very light brown first, and then like as that is drying, then lay over some various shades of blues or other browns or whatever colors you want to kind of add in there as they're drying, or you could do it in stripes. It's up to you. I think with the original painting, it was all just sort of layered. He blocked out the color initially, the light brown color, and then just kind of kept adding to it with random brush strokes over the top until it sort of built up this. Well, in the original painting, it's just this kind of mass of brush strokes of various colors and scratches. So there's no proper shape to it. It just follows those lines and gets colored in as he felt at the time. So I'm just gonna blend his head quickly. I'm gonna stop blending over here. Now I want to try and add in just a very small amount of blue nearer to the outline of our character so that I can very carefully blend to the outline. Just take your time if you're doing this with pastels and you're smudging it in, because it does take a little bit of time, a little bit of patience. Okay. We're getting there. We're laying down all of these colors. It's starting to come together. Now, what I'm going to do with our character's face, just to kind of give it a little bit more depth, I'm going to add in a touch of yellow to his skin tone. Pardon me. But I also want to add in, kind of tempted to add in just a touch of this kind of browny red that I've got here. Just kind of where his hands are meeting his face. Kind of down his wrists a little bit. And the same on this side. So just kind of like down the sides of his hands, down the side of his head or his hands. He only has the one head. Maybe just kind of, it's just to add almost like a little bit of a shadow. And then just gently blend that yellow in a bit. You find pastels always look more dramatic and they're much darker when you first lay them down, but once you blend them, they soften and become lighter. So if you do want to get a much darker color, you sometimes have to, add more layers or add more than you think, add a thicker layer of pastels before you actually blend them. So I'm now going to move on to our fence posts. So I'm going to draw a line. So taking our top fence post, I'm going to create like an edge to it, if you like. So we're going to kind of divide it. almost into 3, I suppose. We're going to have a yellow highlight along one side of it. There are people in the background there, and this side of it too. So we're going to add yellow, and then I'm going to go with this kind of light brown and add another line next to it. Now bear in mind, these are all going to blend, so they won't be quite so obvious stripes. Just laying down the colour. And then underneath that, I want to go in there with my black, which currently has blue on it. With pastels, you can literally just wipe them and they clean up. So remembering a little bit of colour between our people. And then at the bottom of that first rung, I'm going to go in with my black. So this is where the shadows are going to be. And then under that first rung, I'm just going to go back in with my my dark blue, because obviously it's a fence, so you're going to see through and see water through the fence posts, through the fence panels. Okay, and then I'm just going to do the same for the other two panels that we've got. So yellow, brown, a little bit of black. I'm going to do a bit of water in between the fence panels. And then the last one, so back for some yellow. Going in with some brown. A little bit of black. And then from what I can make out, there is a very small gap underneath the fence panels before it meets the pier. So we'll just put a very small amount of blue in under there as well, just to break up the fence from the floor. Okay, so before I add the floor space, I'm going to blend in my fence panels. Now, the other thing you can use when you're using pastels is cotton buds. So if you are working on a really small piece where you want something, you want to have a bit more control over it, you can even use a cotton bud to sort of get into small spaces. Or as I say, if you're folding up kitchen roll, you can just use like the point of where you folded it. But ultimately, most pastel pieces are generally quite sort of blended anyway. You're not generally going to opt for pastels if you're looking for a very clearly defined picture. They're much more for softer arty pieces. It's always really pretty. Look at that. I don't know if it'll show up on the camera. Oh, put it in the right place for you to see, maybe. But if you blend multiple colors at the same time, you actually get this really kind of pretty effect on your kitchen roll where it's all like rainbow colors all mixed together. Obviously, if you're new to pastels, maybe not try blending them all at the same time. I mean, ultimately, you still have to kind of go back in and blend bits of it anyway, but it's just something you can play with as you learn more about how your pastels work. You can start playing with them and seeing what cool effects you can create. Now, there's a couple of patches on here that haven't really blended, and that's probably because there wasn't quite enough pastel on the page to blend it completely. So again, this is just my opportunity to go in and touch up any bits where there's just a little bit too much white for my liking. And the same with brown. And if you have kind of lost some of your yellow in the blend, you can always just go and add a bit more. Okay, so I think I've blended that about as much as the pastels are going to let me at this point. So I'm going to start working on the floor down here. So this is where our kind of browns are going to be coming in. So I'm going to, again, we're going to be I'm going to be following these lines as our main means of coloring. So I'm going to start with the lighter brown color, the sort of almost skin tony color that we were using up here. I'm just going to be basically building up layers because I want the whole thing to really kind of blend, a bit like over here where the colors just sort of merged one into the other. So we're almost, I suppose, going for a kind of a wood effect almost. It doesn't look 100% like wood effects if I was painting wood effect purposely and putting those sort of lines in, but that's the feel we want it to have, that it's natural and old and worn. It's had many, many people walking up and down it over the years. It's been beaten and battered by the weather. It's seen all sorts in its life. And then I'm going to add some other shades of brown in there as well. So where some of the gaps are, I'm going to try and fill those in, some of the white gaps that are left. And it is a very small amount on the other side of him. So we're just going to add in some brown over here too. I might even venture so far as to add a darker tone of brown in here before actually considering adding black. If we can get enough depth with a dark brown, it will definitely minimize the amount of black I may use. Really loving these different shades. They're looking really nice, and hopefully they will blend really well to give us this nice kind of mixed wooden effect. And notice again how my pastels are all following the lines, the angled lines that we drew. And that's the way that we'll blend it too. So starting up here behind our people, going around their legs. Now, as I say, because I'm using pastels, I'm going to go in with graphite to define the people, so it doesn't matter that the pastels have smudged over those lines. You won't see that when it's done at all. So following our horizontal or diagonal lines down here, just going backwards or forwards. Bring a little bit on this side. Put that in. So the bottom line's all blended. Okay. As you can see, as I blend these together, the colors really do merge with each other and blend nicely. Yeah, there's some white gaps, but that's to be expected. And as we already know, that's nice and easily remedied, so we don't worry about that. Blend to our borderline. And then just pick whatever color it is that you want to go in and touch up some of those gaps with. Yes, loving that wood effect. Looking very nice. Okay, to finish our piece off, we need to obviously give our main character some clothes, give him some colour. Now, for the most part, he's black. His clothes are black. Now, if you're using pastels, you can either do it in pastels or you could do his whole body in graphite pencil. That's kind of up to you. It'll take a while, but you could. Now, the only other colour that is really sort of apparent on the original painting is there are some flashes of blue. So if rather than just having an entire blob of black, you wanted to sort of intersperse it with another colour, then I would go with one of your lighter blues that you've used elsewhere on your page. So I'm just kind of going over our guidelines that we set, just sort of a rough idea where we're working to. Okay, so that's kind of his outline, and I think I will add in some blue. He seems to have, it's almost like an outline, I suppose, on especially on one side, just looking at the original painting, sort of over his shoulder on the left hand side, and down his body, kind of around that arm. That's quite a dark blue. I might go in with a slightly lighter one, but yeah, so I'm just going to add in some blue here and there just to kind of break up the black a little bit, and give us some lines to work with. And I think I'm going to also go in with a slightly lighter blue as well. Now bear in mind, these will all blend, so it's not going to look weird. Now, I'm not being too particular about the neatness of the blue, and that's mainly because most of it's going to be blended into black anyway. So you won't really see all of it. You'll see bits of it, and that's kind of what I want, is just that hint of blue here and there, which just kind of gives it that shape that's kind of lost when you block it out completely with black. I'm going to fill the rest of the space with the black. Now with black especially, you do need to, if you want a really strong black finish with pastels, you do need to put it on quite heavily and not have too many white gaps. But of course, you can just add another layer. Excuse me. Okay, so attempt to blend our blue into black on our figure. Just keep blending. Filling in the white gaps. Where's my brown? I think I'm going to add in a little bit more brown around his face. It's just at the moment, my guy is looking a little bit, still looking a bit too ghostly for my liking. Kind of want to add in a little bit more definition, so that his eyes stand out a little bit more, because they're currently kind of just blending into the background. But what I think I'll do is, rather than blending the brown, I'll just leave it. You don't have to blend pastels. And I kind of like this idea of having that sort of slightly defined shape on there. Weird nostrils, and on the original, I think his mouth is actually strangely kind of black. He's got kind of black lips. Blend some of it out. Let's say it really is sort of playing with it and finding what you're happy with. He definitely needs, or my guy definitely needed a little bit more definition. I think even actually just having that that more brown tone there kind of helped a little bit, I think. So that's all good. But I'll leave his mouth. I'm not going to blend his eyes or his mouth. I'll leave those as they are. Although if I can just blend the bit inside his mouth where I put that peachy colour, just to get the white bits covered. There we go. And then she says, okay, so again, because I'm going to be using a graphite pencil to add the details to my other ones, I have, this is, let me see, this is an 8B. So what I'm going to do, because I'm working with pastels, is put down a piece of kitchen roll onto my piece of paper, because I do not want to put my arm into fresh pastels. And then I'm just going to use a sharp pencil to outline my figures again, because I can still see my guidelines kind of poking through. And graphite works really well over pastels. So even if you've got pastels smudged onto your people, you can still go over it anyway. Graphite works really well for that. Graphite is what I use when I do my proper silhouette pictures that you've probably seen on Facebook and Instagram. You can create a really dark silhouette, almost, well, pretty much black silhouette, depending on which graphite pencil you're using. But the softer the pencil, the darker the graphite. So I say this is an 8B, which is pretty soft. So you literally just outline it and color it in. And yeah, there really is nothing more to it than that. You can literally just color in your figure, because it's a lot easier, because these are very sort of thin, and you kind of want that more defined shape to it. Pencils are much easier. So and obviously the harder you press, the more graphite you put down, the darker the lines or the coloring will become. So there's one, and then our other person had kind of a foot sticking out, and was slightly shorter than our other one. There we go. There are people that don't need to be smudged. And if I just shift all of my mess out of the way, my pencils and pastels out of the way, wipe down my surface quickly, try not to smudge all of the bits onto my picture, and then I will show you what I meant about the masking tape and how it really kind of improves the finish of the picture. So it looks quite nice as it is. You know, we've finished our picture. If I could bring it in just slightly, maybe. But once we take the masking tape off, now if you if you are using pastels, if you want to fix it, like if you're not going to be framing it and you're just going to be keeping it as loose paper, you can get pastel fixer, but you can use hairspray. Just literally just like a light spray of hairspray over the picture, and it helps to fix the pastel so that it doesn't smudge and transfer onto other surfaces. So pastel hack for today, hairspray. And when we take the tape off carefully, depending on how sticky your masking tape is, occasionally it might rip your paper. But that's why you need to go slowly. And you see, you are then left with this really nice white border that just helps the picture to kind of pop, depending on where you're going to be mounting it, or you know, if you're going to put a cardboard mount behind it, or if you're just going to frame it. Because as I tend to do with the pictures I have up in my art corner that I work in, I just use clip frames, so I don't tend to mount them. And so I think it's really nice to just have this white border on there, just to sort of frame your piece. Just before we log off, because I've just noticed I never actually went back in to my pond area and did my boats. And just because it'll only take like a minute, I'm just going to do it because, you know, don't want to leave the class with a unfinished picture. That would be terrible. So just going to kind of draw a little sails on, and the other one. There we go. There's the two boats on the pond in the horizon, or on the horizon. So let me see your pictures later on, guys. And for now, I shall say farewell. And I hope you've enjoyed the class.